First of all, a godly life. And if you want to turn to Titus 2, just to make sure you have those noted in your Bible, Titus 2 gives us our key word. And Titus 2 says this in verse 12, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly. That's the goal. How do we live godly? Well, we make some choices. And this is something that you should think about. You should think about personally if you're a young person. And you should think about it as an older and not so young person if you haven't yet done this. These are biblical resolves we should have in our life. The first one we saw this morning, I will not choose to look at what God calls evil. Boy, that's not just for kids. That's for all of us. That's for adults. I will choose by the prompting of God's Spirit, because I don't want to grieve Him, because I don't want to quench Him. I will choose to limit my exposure, as Psalm 101 says. And Psalm 101, by the way, if you want to turn there for just a second, if you haven't marked it, it's not just those two verses. This is actually David's whole life testimony. Starts in verse 2 about personal integrity. I will walk with a perfect heart. Verse 3 and 4 we've already looked at. But then he continues in verse 6. He says, my eyes are going to be on the faithful. I'm going to have proper heroes. And then in verse 8, he said, I'm going to destroy all the wicked of the land. I'm going to cut off evildoers. He said, I'm not going to let anything grow in my life. I'm going to purge my life. Secondly, we saw under a godly life, I will not use my mouth to say what God calls corrupt. I will seek to please God in everything I do. Then we saw from Colossians, I won't let my habits cling to me. And if you remember our study a few months ago about sheep and shepherds and all that, I explained how sheep will follow to their destruction, an old path, and how much like sheep we are. Well, secondly, let's look at outreaching and review that in our minds. Outreaching is the second of the acronym letters, G for godly and O for outreaching. Outreaching, our text was Matthew 28:18-20, and I gave you some points. The first being that I will say to the Lord all through my life, here am I, Lord, send me. And I hope that in each of our lives we want that. I hope that when you start the day, that you'll say, Lord, what do you want me to do today? At work. What do you want me to do this summer? What do you want me to do in a new way of reaching out for you? Here I am. Deploy me. It's kind of like I heard my little sleeper who's on the front row, who's 5 years old. We were on our knees the other night praying, and he said, Lord, I'm thankful I'm in your army, and I'm going to go where you want me to go, and I'm going to do what you want me to do. And I thought, where did he hear that? I'm not sure I said it exactly that way, but he remembered the army and going wherever they say. We should be the same. We should say, Lord, I'll go, I'll do, I'll be, as the song says, what you want me to be. Next, we saw that I will stay in God's way so He can lead me. You see, I being in the way, the Lord led me. And we need to stay on the Lord's path. Because along that pathway, He said, in fact, while you're in the Psalms, turn back to Psalm 16:11, because I want to show you, and I can't put every psalm on these slides, but this is the theme for this godly outreaching life. If you will choose to give your life back to the Lord, everything that the Lord takes from us, He makes it better. Today was Mother's Day. We sat around the table, and I told stories about where the children's mother came from. And I told how I met Bonnie and where I met her and all the sequence of all the Lord's blessings. Did you know the Lord took away from me all these terrible girls I never wanted to date, but I did anyway, and gave me the best? You see, anything you give to the Lord, He gives back to you better than anything you ever had or dreamed. But look at Psalm 16:11. You will show me the path of life. See how in this little, I will stay on God's path or God's way so He can lead me? So say, Lord, I want you to show me your path. And when I'm there, in your presence is fullness of joy. What does it promise in Matthew 28 that we saw? Lo, I am with you always. God says, if you'll follow my path, I will always let you be in my presence. And Psalm 16:11 tells us that when we're in God's presence, we have fullness of joy. And look at this, at your right hand, that's our destination, there are pleasures forevermore. I hope you want to be outreaching in your life. I hope you want to say, Lord, send me wherever you want to send me. There's probably only a handful of us in this room that couldn't live in another country around the world for the rest of our life because we are so wealthy. I'm talking about a poor country. Almost any of us could live in a third world country for the rest of our life with what we possess right now. And I want you to think about strategically in a time we live where we have the freedom to almost go anywhere in the world, and we have the opportunity and the flexibility of life to choose We are not agrarian. We are not living from one harvest to the next, most of us. Most of us don't have vineyards and olive trees that's all we have and that's what we need for the next year. Most of us work and save and have resources. And we should think about, Lord, where do you want to send me? Where could I do the most for eternity? And when I get a little bit later into another one of these slides, I'll tell you that almost all of my great missionary heroes, and yours too, that you read their biographies, were considered weird in their generation because they gave up the life of their generation to live an abnormal life in the eyes of their peers. You look at all of the men, David Livingston and John and Betty Stam and Jonathan Goforth and Hudson Taylor and Praying Hyde and Carey of India and all the way through Adoniram Judson of Burma. All of them took steps down instead of up. They took steps down from the culture of either America or Britain and took a great financial and comfort level cut, and they were considered weird by their peers because they gave up British or American culture for that country. And now there are heroes because they accomplished God's purposes because they said, Lord, here I am.